Hello, and welcome to the California garden in the month of February. In today's episode, we look at all the harvests we made this month, we do a full tour of the garden, we share some things for you to do this month, and we look at some cool gardening products. So let's begin with the harvest we made this month, starting with broccoli. We were growing broccoli in our GreenStalk planter, and as you can see, we harvested quite a lot of big broccoli heads from our GreenStalk planter and the side shoots too. So overall, we were quite happy with the way the broccoli plants grew in our GreenStalk planter. And since they were getting a lot of sunlight, we did notice that they grew very well and produced a lot of broccoli. Now the broccoli plant will produce side shoots for quite some time. So you can expect to harvest these for some time from your plants. Even in the raised beds, you can see how large the broccoli plants have become. And most of these plants were producing broccoli in their side shoots or the side buds. And these are delicious broccoli. I don't think there's any difference in the taste between the main head and the side head. It's exactly the same. You get bite-sized broccoli side shoots from all around your plant. And these side shoots are absolutely easy to harvest and use every day. So if you have broccoli plants that have produced the main head, do not throw away your broccoli plant. It will continue to produce more broccoli on the sides. And you can see here the harvests, they look quite good. Now even in small containers like this 5-gallon containers, you can see the broccoli plant is producing side buds. And here they are. So whether you're growing in raised beds or containers or in the ground, your broccoli plant is one of the most productive plants in your garden, since you can keep harvesting broccoli for a long time after the main head is harvested. And here is a harvest. It looks beautiful, nice fresh broccoli ready to be eaten. Now this is our first raised bed where we had the broccoli plants, a lot of broccoli plants, and we are harvesting the final few side shoots. And one of the side shoots is pretty big, as you can see here. And this plant gets plenty of sunlight, and these plants will be going away very soon once we start planting our spring vegetables. You can see here the harvest, it looks beautiful. But I think we may have to keep a few plants so that we can continue harvesting broccoli throughout the growing season, and then use the space from the other plants to continue planting our spring and summer crops. But the broccoli plants grow for such a long time that it's really hard for gardeners to estimate when these plants can be taken out, and that's the hardest part. It's a very difficult decision to take out these beautifully growing plants and planting something else in place of them. But all in all, our broccoli plants were one of the most productive plants in our garden, and we really enjoyed all the harvest throughout the month from our plants. Cabbage. Our cabbages were mostly growing in the raised beds. One of our raised beds had cabbages that had problems due to some aphids and other insects attacking it. And although we were washing down these cabbages every day, the growth was still affected, but you can still see it's a decent head of cabbage. On the other hand, on the other raised beds, on the bed of the brassicas, we got some really good cabbages. You can see here the heads are very well formed, and these were covered by a mesh cloth. They were within the garden hoops, and these that were protected against the insects due to the mesh cloth or the net cloth did very well. They produced excellent cabbage heads, as you see here. And moving on to carrots. We were growing our Romeo carrots in our whiskey barrel container, and these Romeo carrots are one of the most interesting carrots I've grown in a while. They actually look like radish, but they taste like carrots. So it makes it very easy for anyone to grow these in a wider container like this one rather than deeper. So most carrots need to have deeper containers because they send out these long roots. On the other hand, this variety of carrot, the Romeo carrot, actually goes round and gives you this radish looking carrot, which is very interesting to see. And it's also a very early maturing carrot, unlike some of the other carrot varieties that take a long time to grow. So you can really grow a lot of carrots in a very small space, even in shallower containers, if you grow this carrot variety. And taste-wise, I was quite impressed with the taste. These are very nice, sweet and crunchy carrots. Very much like any other carrot that you would eat, like the Kuroda carrot or even the regular grocery store carrots that you get. And you can see how many carrots we harvested here. These are just an amazing number of carrots, and they look exactly like radishes, winter radishes, the small winter radishes. They look exactly like that, and they are extremely easy to eat. Kids love it because they are like bite-sized carrots. And this is a very unique carrot variety that I may be growing in the future as well. Cauliflower. One of the highlights of this season was cauliflower, growing in our GreenStalk planter here, as you can see. We had several growing in our GreenStalk planter that we harvested. Here's one more that we harvested from the GreenStalk planter. And all our cauliflowers grew quite well. These are the ones from the raised beds. And this is one of the cauliflowers that's called the priced cauliflower. So if you look at how the curds have formed, or the head is formed, it looks pretty different and it's very valued. Now here is another cauliflower. This is growing in a 15-gallon container. We just had a plant, and since this container was available, I just put it into this container and it grew quite well. You can see very beautifully formed head. Very nice looking cauliflower. And here is another one from the raised bed. Once again, this is one of the prized cauliflower kinds. You can see the bud, the cauliflower head is a little different than a regular cauliflower. And the reason it's preferred is because it's great in stir fries. A lot of chefs love this kind of cauliflower. And you can see we actually got 2 of these. And they look quite good and they taste quite delicious. Kohlrabi, also called German cabbage or kohl, which means cabbage in German. This is a very interesting vegetable, one of the most interesting vegetables you'll grow in your garden. The one you're looking at is a purple variety. Now, I'm not a big fan of the purple variety because they don't grow as large as the white ones. But you can see here it looks quite good. It's great to just eat raw. You can cook it as well. You can cook it with spices and lentils and makes a great dish. But even just eating them raw is amazing. Now the white ones are the ones that I prefer more. These are the ones that actually become a little larger in size. You can see this one is about medium sized, but still a lot bigger than the purple variety that we grew. And it also looks quite good. And the other ones actually were even bigger. We were growing about 10 or so on this raised bed. And you can see here, this is quite a large kohlrabi. And once you remove the leaves, you can see that this is quite a large kohlrabi bulb. And here's one more. It's quite large as well. And you can use the kohlrabi leaves. They are perfectly edible. In fact, we use them a lot. But the main part of the kohlrabi is the head itself. The kohlrabi is so delicious to eat. You can see there are 4 kohlrabis here. They're very fresh, delicious, crispy and crunchy. So if you haven't tried growing kohlrabi, do try it out this season. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. And kohlrabi is a cool season crop, which means it's great to grow it in fall or spring, or even in the winters in Southern California. Moving on to mustard. This is the southern giant curled mustard that we have been growing for quite some time. And you can see here this mustard is growing quite well in the winter season. It just loves the cold season. And although we have had some warm days, this mustard hasn't gone into bolting, which is good to see because these are extremely nice leaves. Very tender, very nice and excellent flavor. These are one of the best mustard you can grow to make a lot of dishes if you want to cook your mustard greens. Onions. We had a lot of onions growing on our raised beds and in our containers, and it was time to start harvesting. In fact, I've been a little relaxed on the harvest for these bunching onions or spring onions. But it was time to start harvesting, and we harvested a few this month. And you can see here these onions, they look quite good. And remember, these are spring onions or bunching onions, and these have excellent nutritional value, especially for the tender bulbs that they have. They are extremely nice and delicious. Moving on to peas. We are growing the shelling type peas, not the sugar snap peas, but the shelling type, which means we are growing the peas for the pods or the seeds itself. And these peas have grown quite well. As you can see, the pods have shaped up quite well, not only in the container, but also the raised bed. But overall, I think the peas grew better in the raised bed. I think they just had more space to climb on the trellis here. They grew a little bit better. But even then, you can grow peas easily in containers or in the raised beds or in the ground and still get a decent harvest. Now, most of the peas that we were harvesting were so delicious that we were just munching our way through these as we were harvesting them. These are extremely delicious peas, and every time I grow peas in the garden, I just end up eating it raw. It's just so sweet and delicious. And within a few days, each one of these plants will produce another set of pods, which will be ready for harvest. So all in all, peas are quite a productive plant. They give you excellent harvests, and they taste very good as well. Now let's open up one pea pod to show you how the peas are formed inside. And you can see here beautiful looking peas, very sweet, very crunchy and delicious. And we have been eating almost all our peas that we harvested from these pods, and they have been quite a joy to eat. And this is a pea which has slightly more mature seeds. And you can eat these as well. You can eat them raw, but you can also use it in your cooking. Now, I've always struggled to grow peas in the past, but I think this season we have nailed it. We have grown a lot of peas very successfully this season by just following simple guidelines of preparing good soil, using good varieties to plant, and then taking care of your plant by trellising it. And that's it. These peas grew pretty well. So all in all, we are very happy with the way our peas grew and all our harvest from these pea plants. Potatoes. We planted some grocery store bought potatoes in this raised bed. So the grocery store potatoes were just lying in the pantry area and developed eyes. So we just planted them in the raised beds. So it was pretty much nothing. It was just some freebies that we planted, some potatoes that we were not going to use as well. And we ended up with 5 plants, and you can see how many potatoes have formed on the raised bed. So we kept digging, and initially I was using the spade to dig, but then I realized that this soil is so loose and so nice. And the reason for that is we added a lot of worm castings into this raised bed. If you've been following my videos, I've shown you where I've added worm castings into this raised bed. And that overall improves the soil quality so much. You can see how loose and rich the soil looks. And this is exactly the kind of soil you need to grow good vegetables. So make sure that you're amending your garden with organic matter as much as possible so that you have good quality soil and your plants will love growing in this great quality soil that you have in your raised beds or in your garden. So from just a few plants, we could harvest a lot of potatoes, as you can see. And these were extremely nice tasting potatoes. Homegrown potatoes are very different from the ones that you get in the grocery store. I think they are much more flavorful, the homegrown potatoes. And if you have potatoes sitting in your kitchen or your pantry where you can plant them out in the garden, please do it. I think it's a great idea to give you some really good free potatoes from your garden. And here is how a potato harvest looks like. I think it looks quite good. And these are enough potatoes for quite some time. And we got a lot of potatoes from just a few plants. Radish. Starting with the early radish harvest, we were growing this white clove radish, as you can see, one of the early maturing radishes. The white radishes also grow quite good greens on the top, as you can see. And these radishes look quite good. They mature quite quickly. And they're extremely easy to grow in raised beds. You can see that the greens look nice as well. And let's harvest some other varieties. This is the sparkler radish. This is another white globe. And we were growing a mix of all the early radish like the sparkler, the crimson giant, and the white globe. So all in all, multiple radish varieties that grew quite well. And early radish can be harvested as early as 30 to 40 days and they will still have good sized bulbs. So we were just using up this space next to the tomato plants so that we could grow something here till we are ready for the next gardening season. And as you can see, we grew a lot of radish, early radish that we could use within a month, which was pretty cool. And here's how our harvest looks like. As you can see, all the early radish varieties, colorful radish, beautiful looking radish with great quality tops, which is very important. These greens are amazing and the roots are nicely formed too. And here are some more varieties that we harvested. And a lot of other varieties growing in containers too. And this once again shows you how easy it is to grow radishes in smaller containers too. And this is the French breakfast radish. And we had the salad rose radish also growing in containers. This is again a 5-gallon container. Very easy to grow this radish in a 5-gallon container. Now the salad rose radish is very interesting because it sends out long roots which almost look like carrots, mini carrots. So it's very easy to grow them in a container that's not as wide but is deeper. And this 5-gallon container makes an excellent choice for growing these radishes, the salad rose radish. So you can see here the salad rose radish is supposed to be eaten whole, which means you eat its leaves and the roots. And it tastes quite good. It has a nice mild taste. Which is why I love growing the salad rose radish in the garden. It just takes a very short time to grow these radishes and they grow quite well. They give you decent sized radishes that are extremely nice to eat. And you can see our harvest here, it looks quite good. Now moving on to the white Minoves radish that we were growing in our raised beds. Now these radishes are longer growing radishes. You can see here the roots are quite long and they look quite good as well. But this radish variety takes a long time to mature compared to the other early radish varieties. And you can see here the same radish variety growing in a 15-gallon container. Very large roots, as you can see. Some of these roots are like 12 inches long. These are quite big radishes. And once again, this goes to show that you can grow radishes easily in almost any kind of containers. Raised beds are great too. But even if you just have a 5-gallon or a 15-gallon container, you can easily grow radishes, even the longer kinds, very easily and still get a very good harvest. Just make sure you're using good quality soil. That will really help you get some good quality radishes in your garden. And you can see our radishes look great. Beautiful looking white Minoves radishes. Romanesco. One of the most interesting vegetables that we have grown this month as well. You can see how beautiful the Romanesco looks. You've asked me a lot of questions on Romanesco. So you can think of Romanesco as a cross between a cauliflower and broccoli. Well, technically it's just a type of crispy cauliflower, you can say. And it tastes amazing. This is one vegetable that if stir-fried or cooked with spices, it just tastes amazing. It's one of the more crunchy cousins of cauliflower, you can say. So it tastes like cauliflower with a hint of broccoli, but it's also very crispy. So if you like doing stir-fries, if you like cooking cauliflower and broccoli with spices like turmeric and chili, you will love the Romanesco. It's one of the most interesting vegetables we have grown. and we liked it so much that we might grow this in the future as well. Tomatoes. Our beefsteak tomatoes were growing very well on our first raised bed, and you can see here the tomatoes are quite large, and it's expected that winter tomatoes will have some kind of cracks due to the extreme weather in the winter or changing weather. But overall, I was very happy with the beefsteak tomatoes that were growing on this plant in our first raised bed, and these are being trained on the trellis. And also in our tomato bed, where all the tomatoes were growing, I think we got a harvest of a lot of tomatoes from the tomatoes that were growing since last year. And you can see the tomatoes here, they are decently sized. Even in winters, we were getting some really good tomatoes. And we did get some days of extreme heat this winter, which might have caused these tomatoes to ripen. And we also had tomatoes growing in a container. This is a 15-gallon container. And this is the husky cherry red tomato, which means it's a cherry tomato, but it's a little husky, which means it's a little bigger. And you can see the plant is quite loaded with these cherry tomatoes. And in just a few days, we were able to come back and harvest some more tomatoes from the same plant. And you can see how productive this plant is even in the month of February, which is one of the coldest months of the year in Southern California. And here's a harvest, looks quite good. So make sure you grow some tomato plants in smaller containers so that you have a good supply of tomatoes throughout the season. Now let's move on to the tour of our garden, beginning with the raised bed tour. In our first raised bed, we have some carrots growing. These are the Burpee A1 carrots, and I'm really looking forward to growing them. And we have our beefsteak tomato plant, which is growing on this trellis. It has been trained to grow on this trellis and has become quite huge. It's been growing since the early winter season. We have a lot of broccoli plants that are producing side shoots now. And you saw us harvest a lot of broccoli from these plants earlier in the video. And you can see all our onion plants too, they are doing great. In our second raised bed, we have more carrots. These are the Romeo carrots that will be ready for harvest anytime now. We have some broccoli, we have some onions, and on the side trellis, we have some peas. These pea plants are growing up on the trellis and doing quite well. And we had some winds in the area, so the pea plants fell off a little bit, but hopefully they'll continue to train on this trellis. And on the other side, we have some purple sprouting broccoli and a lot of garlic plants. As you can see, these are the elephant garlic plants, which have been growing for a while now, and some Brussels sprouts between all the onions that are growing. In the next bed, we have some ground cover plants, but this is basically our brassica bed. It had a lot of brassicas, cabbage, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, Romanesco, and some of these are still producing side shoots like the broccoli, and some of these are just sitting there. We have harvested the cauliflowers, Romanesco. So most likely we will be clearing out this bed soon and getting it ready for spring planting and summer planting. In the next bed, we have some kohlrabi still growing. These will be harvested quite soon, including this really huge one in the center. And we have our tomato plants that are still growing quite well. And as I mentioned, even in the winters, it's giving us a decent harvest. We have some mustard plants in the center. And you can see the other side of the tomato plants that are trying to crawl on the trellis. And we just planted some corn plants here, but you can see they are not doing that great because of the high winds that we've been having this week. Some carrots there and some more tomato plants. As you can see, we have 3 left. And in the final raised bed, we have the structure for growing our ivy gourd, as you can see on the back. We just planted some corn plants, and these corn plants are doing well. Once again, a little affected by the winds, but they're doing okay. We have some brassicas. We have our purple potatoes that are growing quite well, and they will need some soil added very soon. We have cilantro, followed by some bunching onions and shallots, and finally the purple kohlrabi at the end, which is now producing quite a lot of kohlrabis. And that concludes the tour of our raised bed garden. Let's now move on to the containers. In the first container, we have some corn plants. We just transplanted these corn plants in this container. And we have our spinach plant, which is still producing buds and seeds, and we will harvest the seeds from this plant very soon. We have potatoes in the next container, multiple varieties growing, and we will be filling this pot up as it grows. And we have potatoes in the next container as well, a couple of different varieties. We have cabbage growing in the next container. We sowed some carrot seeds in the next container. We have some more cabbages growing and some kohlrabis. These have not been getting a lot of sunlight, but they're doing okay. We have more cabbages in the next container. The mint is growing excellent. You can see how nicely it is growing in the shade. And this is one of the plants that loves to grow in shade. And we have our hyacinth bean plant. The hyacinth bean plant is now a little dormant. And we have our shallots and bunching onions in the next container, followed by an empty container, which we still have to use. We have potatoes in the next container, different varieties of potatoes all in one. We have garlic. We are growing a lot of garlic plants in this one container, followed by the eggplant, the millionaire eggplant, which has been growing since last year. And although there are a couple of eggplants here, the production has not been great. We have a lot of beets growing in the next container, followed by the purple cauliflower, which I'm really looking forward to harvesting. I think it's doing great, and I'm really looking forward to a good harvest. And then we have our dwarf nectarine tree, which is doing okay. Moving on to our GreenStalk planter. Our GreenStalk herb planter is doing great, and I wanted to give you a quick update. I reviewed this in detail in our previous video, but I wanted to show you how well these plants are doing now. We have beets, we have spinach, we have cilantro. All of these plants are growing great. And in our original GreenStalk planter, we have broccoli that's producing a lot of side shoots. We have a lot of onions that are growing. And we have some cauliflower. So all in all, a lot of different plants growing in the original GreenStalk planter as well. And we talk about containers. GreenStalk planters are one of the best containers you can use. You can grow vertically in them. And they have this patented self-watering system which makes watering your plants so easy. Now moving on to the other containers on the side. We have onions in the first container, followed by cilantro. There's some turmeric as well in the center. We have a cabbage plant in the next one, followed by some dill. Another cabbage plant that is growing relatively well, not that great. And some beets, different colored beets growing here. And a cabbage plant, the next cabbage plant. A galangal plant. And you can see our hose link watering system, which I'm currently reviewing. I'll have an update for you very shortly on that. And finally, we have some more onions that are growing. Now I have several other containers that I use to test my plants, grow different varieties and see how they do. I also try to use the space around my trees. For example, this fig tree has some space around it. So we are growing some plants here. Our apple tree is also in a container, doing quite well, but we do have a lot of space around the apple tree. And you can see we are growing some brassicas, some radishes around it. And we also have some smaller containers where we are growing kohlrabi and some other vegetables. You can see how nicely they are growing. Some potatoes as well in this 15-gallon container. So all in all, you can use space around your plants and try to use like 5-gallon or 15-gallon containers, grow some plants there. But I just wanted to show you that this is some additional space that we are using to grow plants, and they've been doing well. And now let's look at some things for you to do in your garden this month. Amending your raised bed garden soil is extremely important. If you are growing in the ground as well, this is a good time to add some compost or some good quality planting mix. If you can't get compost in your area, get some planting mix. It has a lot of organic matter. It's available at most nurseries and garden centers. Add some worm castings. Prepare your beds well. If you want, you can add some organic fertilizer as well, but you can do that during planting time rather than now. But all in all, your goal is to prepare your raised beds very well for the upcoming season so that you can grow some great plants. Next, you can also start some seeds. You can still start seeds for tomatoes, peppers and eggplants. And make sure you check out my video on seed starting, which I covered in a previous episode. It's a very detailed episode on how to start your own seeds very easily. And if you start your seeds now, you will be in time for transplanting your plants in about 4 to 6 weeks. So if you had followed me and started your plants back in January, you should be ready to transplant all your seedlings next week, which is the ideal time for planting, at least in Southern California. After the first week of March, I think most plants will settle down very easily into your garden. And this is the time when you should start transplanting most of your seedlings, your spring crops like tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, and they'll grow very well once the spring season begins, which is upon us any day now. In the gardening product section, I wanted to quickly touch base upon the GreenStalk herb planter versus the GreenStalk original planter. I recently published a full video review on the GreenStalk Leaf planter, which is a great system by the way. And I've gotten a lot of questions around these two products. So I'm just going to explain you a few differences between these two products and which one should you buy depending on what you're growing. So I've grown everything from tomatoes to peppers, to eggplants, and almost everything on the original GreenStalk planter. And I've been quite happy. I've grown broccoli, cauliflower, a lot of other large plants in the winter season in the original GreenStalk planter. But then when the leaf planter came out, the GreenStalk leaf planter came out, I realized that the design for the leaf planter is even better. It has smaller pockets. The pockets on the GreenStalk leaf planter are about 3 inches smaller than the original GreenStalk planter. But due to its smaller size, it means that you can get more tiers for the same height of the original GreenStalk planter. So you're getting 42 pockets to grow your plants in the GreenStalk leaf planter compared to the 30 slots for the original GreenStalk planter, which is 5 tiers. Now we are comparing a 5-tier original planter against a 7-tier leaf planter because they are roughly the same height. So we are comparing similar products. So which one should you go for? That's the question, right? So it depends. It depends on what kind of vegetables are you planning to grow. Now, if you are growing a combination of both big vegetables and small vegetables, like me, you can have one of both, one original and one leaf planter. But if you want to stay safe and use the largest container possible, I would suggest buying the original GreenStalk planter. However, the design and the use and the efficacy of the GreenStalk leaf planter, in my opinion, makes it the better choice between the two, because you can grow a lot of things in the leaf planter too. It's not that it's very small, it's pretty decently sized for growing almost everything you need. So yeah, my recommendation would be, if you had to choose only one, go for the GreenStalk Leaf planter. But if possible, if you can manage to have 2 GreenStalk planters, use the original planter for larger plants like tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, which are bigger, and then use the leaf planter for herbs and onions and some other smaller plants, and you'll be perfectly fine. If you have any more questions, please put them in the comments box below and I'll be happy to answer them. So there we have it, folks. That's how our garden looks like in February, and also all those gardening tips and tricks that you learned. If you like this video, do give us a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, put them in the comments box below. If you're not already a subscriber, hit that subscribe button to ensure you get all future updates. We'll see you again soon. Happy gardening!